Wow. Welcome back, friend. Hey, solo episode. It's me, Lane Kennedy, and this is another moment to get excited about your DNA. Yeah, chapter 5 is all about, digging into your genetics, the genetic factors, the environmental influences, where your family comes into play, and making a plan, right? Understanding that you are unique and your recovery journey is going to be unique as well. If you haven't grabbed the book, I want to invite you to grab it over on Amazon, share it, buy one for a friend, and then the two of you can go through it. Make sure you download the app and you can follow along in there as well. And there's lots of free practices, mindfulness, meditation, all kinds of good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff here. So today's episode, it's just me. Tomorrow we'll be back. I promise you. We're going to talk about the environmental influences dun, 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 on addiction and recovery. So I'm on page, let me look where I'm at. Dun, 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 dun. Where am I? Where am I? Hello, friend. Where am I? There's so much information. This was a really heavy chapter to write. And Dummies, the brand Dummies is all about learning made easy and have fun with it. And they were like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yes, I love this." So I hope you just kind of go through this chapter slowly and line by line, and just take your time with it. Okay, let's go to page 98. 98. That's where I start talking about the impacts of environmental factors. And why does this even matter? Like who cares about this, Lane? Well, it matters because your environment speaks volumes to your genes. So environmental influences that refer to the external factors, so outside external factors and conditions surrounding you that then affects their behavior, development, health outcomes, and yep, including addiction, substance use disorder. Right? So the external factors and conditions have an effect on the internal being, you, right? And these influences can both be physical, right? So say you lived by an apple orchard like I did, and there was a well and you drank from the well. So that would be a living condition. So that had a huge influence on me. And all the sprays that they sprayed, that had a huge influence on my genetics. And then social, such as, the cultural norms or relationships. Say you grew up going to a synagogue and there was happiness and joy, or say you grew up in a single parent house, or your parents were divorced, or you went to a private school, or you went to public school. Would be all social influences that are having an effect on your genes. So all of this plays a significant impact on your risk of developing substance use disorder. Isn't that wild? And you're like, but why, Elaine? So these environmental, factors, these external factors are playing this crucial role in shaping your behavior and your choices. So think about that. So go back to my little example of growing up near apple orchards. And I was just running through those orchards and playing in those orchards, right? Taking in all of that stuff into me. And then I grew up and I went to public school, and just thinking about, going back on your timeline, how did you grow up? Was there asbestos in your house? Because that's going to play a role. Were you picked on as a child? I was. I was kind of nerdy and I read way before anybody else did. So that was a problem. People thought I was a weirdo. So, the way that people interacted with me, that was, I became vulnerable. Oh, I became shy and I was emotional. So these environmental and then my individual kind of behaviors as a result of this environment started to come into play. Are you following me here? I hope so. So I really want you to go back and think about, how did you grow up? Because these environments and these cultural situations really, I don't want to say it, are stressful for us, and they put stress on the genes. And so when you have uh, a genetic propensity, remember I talked about this last time, uh, a gene that's ready to get fired or triggered or sparked or released or lit up, however you want to put it, when you have this external environmental influence come about, stress you out, boom, the genes turned on. So we can also think about, early childhood experiences. Children who experience trauma or neglect or abuse, way higher risk of developing substance use disorder later in life. And you're saying, duh, Lane. But then, some don't, and they become introverts, right? And they have no addiction because they didn't have those genes, right? I talked about the twin study, right? Two twins in the book. I talked about that. So everything is working, and everything you need to pay attention to. So trauma, right? So if you had trauma and neglect, or you had any kind of emotional dysregulation when you were growing up, you probably have some stress, which stress is a trigger for the gene. We also want to talk about parental influences. Again, these are outside environmental influences. We're just thinking about influences that are impacting our genes and what makes them light up, what makes them go off, what makes them say, oh, I started drinking when I was 12 years old. So our parents, I grew up in an alcoholic family, and I watched that, and there was a lot of fear, but it was also normalized. And I thought, oh, I can drink too. So that influence had an impact on my genes. The social, so peer influence, when I was in adolescence. So think about when you're in adolescence or young adults, like where were you? What, who were you hanging out with? Right. I was not hanging out with the best crew of people when I was 12, 13, 14, 15. My life didn't really change socially until I was about 16, 17, and then I got a little better. But those peer relationships also have an influence on the genes and how they're expressed. So media, here's one that people never think about. Media has a huge impact on our genetic reflection. So think about how advertisements, how drugs and alcohol are glamorized and normalized and almost trivialized at this point. And that can also have an impact on one's genes. We also want to think about the access to education. How was it for you? Did you have all of the tools that you needed to succeed educationally? Economic stress, right? Did you grow up in a house of hardship? I know I did. Was there any financial instability? Yeah, 100%. So if I'm just sharing with you about me, like I had these check marks, boom, economic stress, access to education, boom, stress, media influence, that was the time when they were cracking eggs in the pan and just saying no. And I was like, oh, that looks cool. Like, I was like, that was shaping my behavior. My peer pressure, the people who I was hanging out with, my parental check, 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 trauma and neglect. My mother left when I was 5, check, right? So I was just like waiting for that significant moment to occur. And when it did, I was ready for that drink. So I want you to really investigate these environmental factors that were working unbeknownst to you. And your genes are there waiting. Okay. They're just waiting. And so when we're at that brink of stress, it's like a perfect storm happens. and you drink and you think, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for. This is exactly taking the edge off of me. This is exactly making me feel right. This is all working for me. So all of this has had significant impact on your genes. And so now I want to switch the conversation over a little bit to asking you to open the door to a personalized approach. How can you approach your recovery for you? And when you understand what genes you have and how they're working, you might consider eating differently. You might even consider hanging out with different people. You might move your body differently, right? When I found out that my genes, I actually need to work out, and that dopamine receptor needs to be hit like 6 times a week. And I learned that physical activity can actually pump me up and make me feel good. I changed how I was living. So creating an individualized approach to your recovery becomes a really great tool. The other thing that I want to share about here in this episode is that it's important to recognize that the knowledge of your genetics can be transformative. I'm reading this from the page 108. Understanding your genetic predispositions can help you make more informed decisions about your recovery process. For example, if you have a genetic sensitivity to certain substances, this might influence your approach to managing cravings and triggers. I'm going to take this one step further and talk about a histamine gene. This gene, the HIO gene, if you are eating, I don't know, let's say kombucha. Say you gave up drinking alcohol and now you're just drinking kombucha and you're like, I'm on the kombucha train and I love it. Meanwhile, you are breaking out in a rash every day and you're like, why do I keep getting these hives? Because you have triggered this gene. The histamine response has gone off on you. And so understanding that you have power when you are educated and you can make informed decisions about your recovery process. So you could say, you know what? I'm not drinking the booch anymore. I'm done with that kombucha. I'm going to drink celery juice or something else, genetics are so key for your transformation and for living in long-term recovery. I really want you to understand that this is about you being a joy chaser in long-term recovery. I don't want you to be miserable. I want your genes sparking on fire, yet saying, yes, you're giving me all the things that I want. So recovery is not just about surviving. It's about thriving. It's about unleashing your self-preservation and living your ultimate life. Just one baby step at a time. One little gene, just investigating one little gene at a time. So I hope this episode gave you some insights, some things to consider. This chapter is jam-packed with ideas. And again, if you haven't grabbed the book, I want you to go over to Amazon. Sobriety for Dummies. It's waiting for you. Make sure you download the app as well so you can hang out with me, ask questions. I am there for you, my friend. It's so good to hang out with you. Oh, so good. If you have any questions, let us know. We're here for you. Tomorrow we'll be back in the next episode. Okay, take good care. I'll catch up with you soon. Bye for now.